want to tell you something that has been sitting with me for a while. In 2026, two separate scientific studies were published about the Shroud of Turin. The first one, from the University of Padua and Pavia, analyzed the DNA found in dust particles collected from the cloth. The results showed that more than 55% of the DNA came from populations in the Near East. About 38% pointed to South Asia, possibly India. Less than 5% was European in origin. Their conclusion: the genetic fingerprint of the shroud is fundamentally incompatible with a medieval European forgery. The second study, published in NPJ Heritage Science, which is part of the Nature portfolio, took a different approach. Instead of asking who touched the cloth, they asked a more specific question. What about the actual textile samples used in the 1988 carbon dating? The physical threads. The ones three independent laboratories tested and dated to between 1260 and 1390 CE. The ones believers spent 38 years arguing were contaminated repair patches sewn in by medieval craftsmen. The 2026 Nature study looked at those exact fibers and found no contamination, no repair material. The fibers are consistent with the main body of the shroud. Think about what just happened. The science got more rigorous, the data got more precise, and the contradictions got worse. That is what we are going to talk about today. Let me start where most people start. The common knowledge version of the Shroud of Turin goes something like this. It was a medieval forgery. Science proved it in 1988, and only credulous believers and conspiracy theorists still argue about it. And honestly, if you stopped there, you would have a defensible position. In 1988, three of the most prestigious radiocarbon dating laboratories in the world, Oxford University, the University of Zurich, and the University of Arizona, each independently tested a small sample from the shroud. All three reached the same conclusion. The cloth was made somewhere between 1260 and 1390 CE. That is the Middle Ages. That is France or northern Italy. That is not first century Jerusalem. The results were published in Nature magazine in 1989. They were peer-reviewed. Cardinal Anastasio Balestrero, the Archbishop of Turin, held a press conference and stated that the shroud could not be authentic. The Vatican, notably, never claimed otherwise. The official position was always careful. The shroud is an image, not a relic. It is venerated, not declared authentic. So, the sensible conclusion, the one that requires no conspiracy and no special pleading, is that someone in medieval Europe created an extraordinarily detailed cloth depicting a crucified man. People venerated it, and the story grew from there. And for most of recorded modern history, that was more or less where things stood. Now, if you have been following this channel for a while, you know we do not stop at the comfortable layer. We keep peeling. The deeper layers here are worth staying for. Subscribe if you want to follow this investigation all the way through. Here is the part that most people do not know. And it is the part that started breaking open this story before any of us were paying attention. In 1978, 10 years before the carbon dating, a group of scientists got something unprecedented: direct physical access to the Shroud of Turin for 120 continuous hours. This was the Shroud of Turin Research Project. STURP. 33 scientists from the United States. Physicists, chemists, biologists, textile experts, optical specialists, a forensic pathologist. They brought about 80 boxes of equipment to Turin. They worked around the clock. They had spectrometers, X-ray fluorescence equipment, ultraviolet photography rigs, and infrared cameras. They tested every hypothesis that a skeptic could reasonably propose. Was it painted? No. The spectroscopic analysis found no pigments, no dyes, no paint vehicles. The fibers themselves are discolored, but there is no added substance on top of them. Was it produced by acid? No. Chemical analysis ruled out the presence of acids capable of producing the image. Was it a contact impression from a heated object? No. There is no flattening of the fibers that would result from contact with heat, and the image wraps around anatomical features in a way that cannot be explained by simple surface contact. Was it some early form of photography or early chemical exposure process? The technology had not been invented yet, but even applying modern photographic principles retroactively, the image contains something photographs do not: three-dimensional information encoded in its density gradations. The image is brighter where the body would have been closer to the cloth and darker where it was further away. That kind of spatial information encoding is not something a flat image contains. It is something a distance map contains. And here is where the STURP team landed after 120 hours. They concluded, and I want to be precise about this, that the discoloration of the image is not due to any substance added to the fibers, but to a rearrangement of the atoms already in the fibers. Not paint, not acid, not heat, not photographic chemicals. The atoms of the linen fibers themselves were somehow altered at the molecular level to produce the image. And then they said the mechanism was unknown. They did not say this was proof of a miracle. They said they could not explain it. That is a different and more honest thing to say. But it is also profoundly uncomfortable, because what it means is this: we have an image on a cloth that was not created by any method available in the medieval period, or, as far as anyone has demonstrated, by any method available now. Pay attention to this part. We are not talking about a blurry impression that could plausibly have been faked by a clever forger working in a French workshop. We are talking about a cloth that encodes three-dimensional anatomical information that shows what appear to be blood flow patterns consistent with actual wounds from a crown of thorns and a crucifixion, and that no modern scientist armed with the full knowledge of physics and chemistry has been able to reproduce. There have been attempts. There have been researchers who tried to replicate the image using various methods: bas-relief techniques, ultraviolet laser pulses, corona discharge experiments. Some produced partial resemblances. None produced the combination of features found on the shroud: the three-dimensional encoding, the absence of directional lighting, the anatomical consistency, the image depth of only 2 to 3 microfibers. No one has replicated it, and the attempts themselves are interesting, because each failed replication teaches us more about what the image is not, without moving us any closer to what it is. That cloth was tested in 1988 and dated to the Middle Ages. Both things are true. They do not fit together. And this is only the first layer. And here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because by the time we get to 2026, we are not dealing with 2 contradictory facts. We are dealing with 4 or 5 of them, and they are all well-sourced and they all contradict each other in different directions. Let me tell you about Giulio Barcaccia and Antonio Achilli. Barcaccia is a plant geneticist at the University of Padua. Achilli is a molecular anthropologist at the University of Pavia. They are not advocates for the shroud's authenticity. They are scientists who decided to apply modern metagenomic analysis to dust particles collected from the cloth over the years. Metagenomic analysis means you are not looking for one specific organism's DNA. You are sequencing everything, all the DNA fragments in the sample, and then using reference databases to map where those fragments came from geographically and genetically. It is the same kind of technique used to reconstruct the genetic histories of ancient populations from burial sites and archaeological materials. Their results, published on bioRxiv in March of 2026 and reported by Vatican News and multiple academic outlets, showed a genetic fingerprint that tells a very specific story. 55% or more of the human DNA in the shroud dust traces back to populations in the Near East: the Levant, present-day Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Cyprus, the regions populated by Druze and related populations that share ancient lineages with Jewish populations. The mitochondrial haplogroup TH33, identified in the sample, is prevalent precisely in those communities. About 38% of the signal points toward South Asia, toward India specifically, and less than 5% of the human DNA is European. Now, if a medieval forger in France or northern Italy made this cloth, as the carbon dating requires, where did the Near Eastern DNA come from? You cannot explain 55% Near Eastern origin by claiming that a few medieval pilgrims from the Levant happened to touch the cloth. That is not how population genetics works. The genetic signature of whoever this cloth was in sustained, extended contact with is overwhelmingly, stubbornly, from the wrong part of the world. The DNA says Near East. The carbon dating says medieval Europe. Those two statements cannot both be fully correct. One of them is wrong, or both of them are describing something more complicated than a simple forgery story. But wait, because I have not even gotten to the most uncomfortable piece yet. For 38 years, the main defense against the 1988 carbon dating was the repair patch theory. The argument went like this. The sample tested in 1988 was cut from a corner of the shroud that had been repaired by skilled weavers in the 14th century, using newer threads rewoven invisibly into the original cloth. The laboratories had inadvertently dated the repair, not the original cloth. This explanation was formalized in a peer-reviewed paper by Raymond Rogers of Los Alamos National Laboratory in 2005. It appeared in Thermochimica Acta. Rogers argued that the corner sampled in 1988 showed chemical characteristics different from the rest of the cloth, specifically the presence of madder root dye and a reweaving pattern consistent with medieval repair work. It was the scientific defense of record for believers for 2 decades. It gave the position credibility. It referenced a real chemist at a real institution. It was peer-reviewed. It was the argument. And in 2026, the NPJ Heritage Science Study, published in the Nature portfolio, went back and analyzed the actual preserved fibers from the 1988 radiocarbon samples, the physical threads that were cut and sent to Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. Their conclusion: the fibers are consistent with the main body of the shroud. There is no evidence of contamination, no repair material, no medieval rewoven threads. The sample integrity is solid. The argument that sustained the believer position for 38 years just collapsed under the weight of the very kind of science believers had been hoping would save them. And here is the thing. The people who should be celebrating that news are the skeptics, the carbon dating skeptics. Because the Nature study proved that the 1988 testing was done on good material. The sample was representative. The result was clean. So the carbon dating stands. 1260 to 1390. Medieval. And the DNA still says Near East, and Stirp still cannot explain how the image was made. These 3 conclusions are not in dispute. They are not fringe theories or internet speculation. They come from peer-reviewed science conducted by institutions with no stake in the outcome. And they cannot all be true in the same simple story about a single medieval cloth. This is the part nobody says out loud. We have been framing this debate for decades as believers versus skeptics, the faithful versus the scientists, the church versus the laboratories. And as a framing device, it is very convenient because it lets both sides feel certain. Believers point to Stirp and say the image proves divine origin. Skeptics point to the carbon dating and say the cloth is medieval and the discussion is closed. But here is what actually happened in 2026 if you step back from both camps and look at what the science actually produced. The DNA study was not funded by believers trying to vindicate the shroud. It was genomic science applied to ancient textiles by 2 researchers at respected Italian universities. The result pointing to Near Eastern origin was not what anyone expected going in, and it was not published to make a theological argument. It was a data result, and the data is inconvenient for everyone. The Nature NPJ study was not funded by skeptics trying to close the case. It was heritage science, and its conclusion, that the 1988 samples were clean and representative, destroyed the believer's main lifeline while simultaneously leaving every other anomaly completely intact. Think about what that means. The 2026 science did not solve anything. It made the problem more precise. It eliminated one possible explanation, the repair patch theory. And the thing it revealed underneath is stranger and harder than the explanation it removed. Go back to 1978. J.J. Benítez was a young Spanish journalist, 31 years old, with a background in investigative reporting. He had already covered stories that brushed against the edges of what official channels wanted reported. He was not yet the author of Caballo de Troya, the series that would eventually sell tens of millions of copies and become one of the most controversial investigations of the life of Jesus ever published. He had not yet spent 4 decades traveling to every location mentioned in the Gospels, consulting with physicists and theologians and archaeologists, building the research framework that would anchor his life's work. What triggered all of it was the shroud. He has described the image formation problem, this moment in 1978, when Stirp's preliminary findings began circulating, as the question that changed everything for him. Not Ezekiel? Not the UFO reports? Not the Gnostic Gospels? The shroud, a cloth that should not exist in the way it exists, producing an image that should not be there by any mechanism anyone has been able to identify. He spent his career trying to understand what that image implied about what actually happened to the man whose outline appears on it. He investigated the shroud not as a devotional object, but as a forensic problem. The same way he would approach any investigation. What are the facts? What do they rule out? What do they refuse to rule out? And the honest summary of Benítez's engagement with the shroud is not a tidy answer. It is a progressively more detailed version of the same bewilderment he felt in 1978. The more he learned, the harder the question became. The more precisely the anomalies were documented, the less they resolved. What Benítez understood, and what the 2026 data confirms in a way he could not have fully anticipated, is that the shroud operates differently from the artifacts we are used to. Most artifacts, when subjected to enough rigorous analysis, give up their secrets. The more you study them, the cleaner the picture becomes. The Dead Sea Scrolls, subjected to modern analysis, told us more about their authors. Egyptian mummies, analyzed genetically, told us about migration patterns and family connections. The story gets cleaner. The shroud does the opposite. The more precisely it is analyzed, the more the data points in incompatible directions. And the critical thing, the thing that is easy to miss, is that this is not because the analysis is sloppy. It is because the analysis is getting more precise, and the precise data is contradictory. And here is the thing I keep coming back to. We are comfortable with mysteries we cannot measure. If someone says we will never know what Jesus truly taught, we nod and move on. But when science walks into a room with 120 hours of access and 33 specialists and every analytical instrument available at the time, and then walks out saying we cannot explain how this image was formed, that is a different category of not knowing. That is a measurable gap, a documented, instrumented, peer-reviewed gap in our knowledge. The Shroud of Turin, after decades of the most sophisticated analysis applied to any artifact in human history, is still not explained. And now listen to the callback. We started with the comfortable version. Science settled this in 1988. Carbon dating. Medieval? Case closed. Here is what the settled version looks like in 2026. The carbon dating is valid. The 2026 Nature study confirmed the sample was clean. And the cloth also has a genetic profile that points overwhelmingly to the Near East, and also contains an image that no modern scientist has been able to reproduce or explain, and was also tested by 33 scientists for 120 hours who ruled out every material explanation available to a medieval forger, and also has pollen deposits identified by botanist Max Frey in 1973 from plant species that grow exclusively in and around Jerusalem, with several extinct species that would not have been available in medieval Europe. The case is closed, except for all the parts that are not closed. The most honest thing science has told us about the shroud is this: we know what did not make it. We do not know what did. That is not a satisfying conclusion. It is the only defensible one. I want to take a moment to be direct with you about what this channel is. Most places that cover topics like this want to tell you what to think. They either want to prove miracles or disprove them. They want the story to have an ending. I do not do that, because I think people who have followed this material carefully enough deserve more than a clean answer that makes them feel resolved. This channel exists because some questions are worth holding without resolution, and that takes a certain kind of viewer. If what we do here has been valuable to you, if sitting with real complexity is something you want to support, the Super Thanks button is one way to do that. It keeps this investigation going, and it tells me that you are not just a viewer. You are someone who came here to think, and that matters. Now, let me tell you what this means practically. When I think about the Shroud, I think about the experience of someone who goes in fully convinced of the medieval fraud explanation, as I was for a long time, and then actually reads the Stirp papers, not summaries, not opinion pieces. Not the actual published findings. There is a specific discomfort in encountering a scientific conclusion that is careful, well-documented, and makes no theological claims, but lands in a place that feels deeply inconvenient for the settled narrative. The Stirp team were not believers trying to prove the Shroud was real. Several of them went into the project expecting to find evidence of forgery. Some of them arrived skeptical and left saying they could not explain what they had found. That is a different thing from a conversion experience. It is the scientific acknowledgement of a gap. And honest acknowledgement of a gap is not the same as filling that gap with faith. I think of Walter Macrone, for instance. Macrone was a microscopist, one of the most respected forensic scientists in the world at the time. He was initially part of the Stirp project. He concluded the image was made with iron oxide pigment, red ochre, and vermilion. He went public with that conclusion in 1979. The rest of Stirp disagreed with his methodology and his conclusions, arguing he had confused iron oxide found in the blood areas with iron oxide in the image itself. The dispute became public and personal. Macrone broke with the team. But here is the interesting thing about Macrone's position. Even accepting his iron oxide conclusion, it does not fully explain the image. Iron oxide does not encode three-dimensional information. Iron oxide laid on by a brush has directionality and pooling characteristics that the Shroud image does not show. Macrone explained the image by pointing to a substance. He never explained the image by pointing to a method that would produce all the features simultaneously. And the argument about Macrone's methodology has never been conclusively resolved. That dispute about what the spectroscopic data actually shows in the image area versus the blood area is still technically open, which is another way of saying even the most well-developed skeptical position on the image formation does not fully close the case. The gap is real, and it is still there in 2026. Here is what I think the Shroud asks of us now, if we are willing to take it seriously. Not as believers, not as skeptics, but as people trying to think clearly about hard things. It asks us to hold two true statements at the same time without forcing them into a resolution they have not earned. Statement 1. The 1988 carbon dating was performed on uncontaminated representative material confirmed by a 2026 analysis of the actual sample threads, and the result was a medieval date. Statement 2. The image on that cloth cannot be explained by any method available in the medieval period, or in any period since, according to the most rigorous scientific investigation ever performed on any artifact. You do not have to be religious to find that combination unsettling. You do not have to be a skeptic to find the DNA pointing to the Near East unexpected and unexplained. You do not have to choose a side to recognize that something here does not add up in the way that simple stories add up. What Benítez found, and what he articulated more clearly than almost anyone else who has engaged seriously with this material, is that the Shroud refuses to behave like a forgery, and it also refuses to behave like an ancient artifact with a clean provenance chain. It refuses to let you settle. It just keeps producing new data that opens new questions while closing none of the old ones. And maybe that is not a failure of the evidence. Maybe that is actually what the artifact is communicating. Think about the history of the Shroud as a physical object. It appeared on record in Léré, France in the 1350s. That is consistent with the carbon dating. A local bishop at the time, Pierre d'Arcis, wrote a letter to Pope Clement VII, claiming that the cloth was a forgery and that the artist who made it had confessed. That letter exists. It is cited by skeptics as strong historical evidence. But note that the bishop did not name the artist, and the alleged confession has never been located. The letter exists. The evidence it claims to summarize does not. Before Léré, the historical record of the cloth is disputed. Some researchers trace it to a cloth known as the Image of Edessa, documented in texts from as early as the 4th century, which was reportedly a miraculous image of Jesus not made by human hands. Others trace possible connections through the Knights Templar and the sack of Constantinople in 1204. The historical thread is tangled and not proven, but neither is it absent. The honest summary is that the cloth appears in documented European history in the 1400s, consistent with a medieval origin, and the physical evidence it carries is inconsistent with a medieval origin. Both of those things are true, and science, as of 2026, has not resolved the contradiction. I spent a long time wanting this to resolve. I think most of us do. We want the investigation to produce a verdict. Either it is what believers say it is, or it is what the skeptics say it is. We want the evidence to line up on one side. It does not. And if you have spent any real time with this material, really reading the studies, not the summaries, you know that the uncomfortable position, the one where you hold the carbon dating and the unexplained image formation and the Near Eastern DNA and the pollen evidence in your head at the same time, without throwing any of them away, is actually the most intellectually honest position available. There is something almost clarifying about it when you stop fighting the discomfort. Because what the shroud reveals is not just a mystery about a cloth, it reveals something about the limits of the tools we use to resolve mysteries. Carbon dating is reliable, and it dated the cloth to the Middle Ages. Genomic analysis is reliable, and it pointed the cloth to the Near East. Image formation analysis was as rigorous as 1978 science could make it. And it found nothing. 4 decades of science, each new tool more precise than the last, and the verdict is, we cannot explain this with what we know. I think that is what drew Benítez to this. Not the answer, the quality of the question, the way it persists, the way new tools sharpen the mystery instead of dissolving it. By the way, I left something in the comments of this video. It is research I compiled over the past several years on the historical Jesus investigations, including material on the shroud and related sources that never fits into a single video. 5 years of notes. If you want to go deeper than what we can cover here, it is there. So where does this leave us? In 2026, we have more data about the Shroud of Turin than at any point in history. We have genetic analysis pointing to the Near East. We have textile analysis confirming the 1988 carbon sample was clean. We have the original STIRP findings confirming no known image formation mechanism. We have a cloth that is simultaneously dated to medieval Europe and genetically connected to the ancient Near East, with an image that neither population, medieval European or 1st century Jewish, could have made by any method we can identify. The mystery is not smaller than it was in 1978 when Benítez first encountered it. It is larger, more precisely defined, and no closer to a resolution. I think the most honest thing you can do with this is let it be what it is. A genuine open question. Not a proof of faith, not a closed case. An artifact that is still, after all the science, still asking us something we cannot answer. And there is something worth sitting with in that. Because in a world where we have extraordinary tools for analysis and measurement, the things that refuse to resolve are the ones worth paying the most attention to. The shroud refuses to resolve. That is, I think, what Benítez understood, and what he spent a lifetime trying to say. One question for the comments. If you had to choose between the carbon dating result and the STIRP image formation findings, if one of them is telling the truth and one of them is missing something, which one do you find more credible? And why? I want to hear how you think through it. No right answer here. I genuinely do not know. Let's work through it together. And if you want to dig into the primary sources, the STIRP papers, the Rogers 2005 study, the 2026 Nature analysis, the Benítez early writings on the shroud, I compiled research in the comments that goes deeper than any single video can hold. 5 years of notes I could not fit here. Take what is useful. If this kind of investigation is what you come here for, subscribe. New video up regularly. I will see you in the next layer.